Monday, July 24th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight we talk about the lies in consumer electronics.
Let's do this! So now, moments before the show, we concluded that the reason the middle class can't live in modern cities is because of the second law of thermodynamics.
That is absolutely true. If the second law of thermodynamics was breakable, then middle-class people would be able to live in New York City just fine.
Now, that might sound odd, but I guess we threw that out because when we came to that conclusion, which was actually a valid conclusion, that is actually the argument we had. We're not kidding. That's the kind of crap we argue about, and those are the kind of conclusions we come to. And that was a at least hour-and-a-half argument.
Well, you know, just to give everyone some clarification in case they're going, hoa, hoa, hoa. We started out talking about, there's some article saying, middle-class people have a hard time living in cities because it's great for poor people to live in cities. At least it's better for if you're a poor person, it's better to live in a city where there's a lot of low-paying jobs and, some kind of slum to live in than it is to live in a suburb where it just sucks if you're poor.
Yet if you're a rich person, it's also great to live in the city because there's a lot more to do with your money.
And you can live in some luxury penthouse and there's all sorts of office buildings and you can hobnob with all kinds of, fancy people, and they're making TV shows there.
But gentrification is slowly pushing middle-class people out of all the cities in the world. Yeah, not just New York City, but every major city in the world in an industrialized nation is having this problem.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a middle-class person, you can't live in a slum or anything. That's you make more money than that. Why would you live in such a degrading place? But at the same time, you want to live in the city for its conveniences, but you can't. Any place that's actually nice, you can't afford because you're not rich.
I mean, we're middle class, and it cost us quite a bit of money to commute as far as we do. But to move that much closer to New York City would cost far more than commuting costs, even with gas prices.
Yep. So, of course, the way to solve this is to build a lot more places to live very rapidly, so and so on, resources, so and so on, thermodynamics.
Yep. We got to the old Duvall hypothesis/theory that is somewhat dubious and long-term, but it was relevant to the discussion. And
Yep. So there you have it.
We thought that was
if
odd
you could
enough.
somehow take a piece of coal and get 1 million freaking electricities out of it. in no scientific terms.
Now also, all of you who read the forums regularly saw this already, but our good friend Ido came out over the weekend, and she and I went exploring abandoned buildings at great personal risk. So if you were at all interested in urban exploration or pictures of us inside of rickety old mills built at the turn of the century or on the roofs of old brick foundries that are barely held together, there are some fantastic pictures linked to in the forum.
Mm-hmm.
The best part was as we were leaving the mill, the floor started collapsing under us. Hey, I survived. I'm happy.
You could. I survived also, and I'm also happy, sitting safe at home in my non-rickety house.
Yeah, but you didn't get to see a place where a hobo may or may not have slept.
I saw a picture of a place where a hobo may or may not have slept.
True, you did.
So what?
You didn't
I lose?
You didn't get to stick your hand into a giant old coal-fired boiler, wondering if there was any horrible animal in there that was going to maul you.
So you're saying I lucked out, which is I agree. I think I lucked out.
Anyway, also from the forums, we have had a lot of feedback as to the possible minor format changes to Geeknights that we've been mulling over. And we're not going to really talk about it a lot today, but we're going to be subtly changing the show over the course of the week and trying different things. And we've taken all of your input seriously.
Yeah, if you care about the format of this show, you should join our forum and talk it up. Because if you don't say anything, we don't know what you want. So if you're like, oh, they stopped doing my favorite part of the show, or they moved something to the end and now I don't like the show anymore, well, we're going to change it back. Just tell us.
Yep.
Don't run away and say, it sucks.
The only real question I have to ask all of you right now, because this is something that is part of all the discussions we've been having. Where should the things of the day go? Do you like them where they are, or do you want them at the end of the show? I'm just asking that question. I want your feedback before I say what I think.
Yeah, if we do it one segment at a time, then I think that we can pretty much get the format down. So do you even want things of the day to stick around?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of you actually click the links because I don't look at those stats, and they're not that easy to find out at all.
Yeah, do you like things of the day? Do you want them, or are you better off without them? And if we have them, where in the show should they go?
But anyway, we'll break away from that right now, and we won't even have a geek bag today because we have a big news, and we really don't want to do this one short. Now,
It's a breaking, what's it called? News alert.
this is something we talked about at least once a while ago when it was a rumor, and I'm pretty sure I said that I didn't think this would ever come to pass, and I gave a lot of reasons.
And I said, it seems kind of reliable, though. It's from a kind of reliable source.
See, that's what bugged me. It was from a reliable source, but at the same time, it seemed ludicrous and crazy.
And the rumor just didn't die until today when it came back from the dead.
Oh, holy crap.
And it is actually real and true.
So, AMD, the people who make all the good chips, though actually lately Intel's been catching up.
Intel has been making a lot of good chips, but AMD, the people who make the cost-effective chips for PCs.
Well, let's put it this way. Up until about the year 2002, AMD was the undisputed champion of chips that were not overpriced. Like, there was no question. Any nerd, unless they had infinite money, would buy an AMD chip.
No, it's pretty much until very recently, like within the past year or two, that
Yeah,
when
I throw out an arbitrary year. What do you want?
I say since the Pentium M came out is when Intel has been slowly catching up.
True.
Before then, Intel was definitely not up to par. Because
Yes.
the Pentium 4 is just, whoa, crap.
Yeah, at least the Pentium M had a lot of advantages.
Yeah, well, the Pentium M wasn't really... It was lower powered, but it's when they started getting the architecture design corrected from being the over crazy monster that the Pentium 4 was.
Yep.
I think I heard somewhere that the new Pentium chips, like the new fast ones, like the one we have in our Mac Mini, are more akin to Pentium 3s than Pentium 4s. It's just they figured out how to make them better. Some guys in Israel did it all.
But anyway, AMD, that we talked about briefly now, has bought ATI, who are pretty much right neck and neck with NVIDIA for the video card and, to a lesser extent, the chipset markets.
Yep, and I think that, there have been so many news sources covering this. They've said everything there is to say, except from our point of view, they haven't said everything there is to say.
Yes, and we have two very important points of view. The point of view of the PC gamer and the point of view of the technologist.
And the point of view of the Linux guys.
Linux is key here. Now, we really don't want to cover exactly all the technical stuff because, like Scott said, that's everywhere. But very briefly, AMD makes processors and Intel makes processors. They are compatible with each other in terms of the instructions they use and how they work as processors, but they're completely different architectures to a degree.
You need different motherboards.
Now, motherboards have a chipset, which is basically the chips that sit around the processor and control everything on the motherboard.
So they're just some motherboard chips, if you don't understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, so think about we have people who make processors and people who make motherboards, and you need one of each to have a computer.
Yeah, and you also need a video card.
Now, ATI and NVIDIA also made video cards. In fact, that was their primary business.
Well, they make the video card chips. They don't make the video... ATI actually does make the
Yeah,
video
if you want to
card.
get specific about that, I bought a Creative Graphics Blaster Extreme that had an Intel... it had an...
NVIDIA chip on it.
Actually, the Graphics Blaster Extreme didn't.
Really?
I forget what it had. It was something weird.
Whatever.
The GeForce 2 GTS had an NVIDIA chip.
Yes.
But anyway, none of you care about that. Just pretend they make video cards, because that makes this easier.
Yep.
Now, it used to be that Intel and ATI chips seem to go together, at least from my perspective. Because
no, it was more like how can I explain this? They don't really go together in any particular way.
Well, it seemed that people who bought Intel chips tended to have ATI video cards, and the people who bought AMD chips tended to have Enforce chipsets and NVIDIA cards.
Well, I didn't really notice that so much, but the Intel tended to always be the chip where if you wanted the fastest thing in the universe, you could pay a lot of money and get it. And ATI, in terms of power of the chips, seemed to actually compete pretty well with NVIDIA. It's just they didn't compete so well on the, awesome drivers, compatibility, stability, and Linux support.
Yeah, well, consider this. There's another whole thing here. You have the video cards, you have the chipsets, you have the CPUs, and then for the video cards and sometimes the chipsets, you have a driver, which is the software that's between the hardware itself and you, the user, your computer. Now, Windows, this isn't much of an issue because they make proprietary drivers for both ATI and NVIDIA chips for Windows. For Linux, it's a whole other story because NVIDIA very, very openly embraced Linux. And while they didn't give a completely open source driver, they made it very easy to use NVIDIA chips in Linux. And in fact, the drivers that existed in Linux work very, very well, and it's very easy to make an NVIDIA chip do what you want.
Yeah, and people who are using ATI on Linux have big problems.
Now, ATI has terrible drivers, even in Windows. They've gotten better over the last few years, but they have a reputation for having just terrible drivers.
Yep, they're ass. It's hard to unless you're using an ATI card for gaming on Windows. It's really hard to make it do what you want, and it can even be unpleasant in Windows.
Think of this. The cards are pretty much technologically equal. I mean, ATI video cards were very powerful, and so were NVIDIA cards. But there's a lot of that potential in ATI cards was underutilized because the drivers just were so inefficient and bloated and terrible.
Right, so right now, up until today, I've been of the mind that if I'm going to buy a computer, I'm going to buy an AMD chip because it is the least money for the most power. I'm going to get an NVIDIA graphics card because it works with Linux. And I'm going to get the NVIDIA chipset on the motherboard
called NForce
because it works the best with the NVIDIA graphics card, and it's also really, really good.
Yep. I mean, the NForce chipset, when it first came out, when NVIDIA, announced this whole thing.
NForce 1, well, when it first came out, the existing market dominators were VIA?
Yeah, VIA.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them. And they're still around doing their thing. But seriously, NVIDIA with the NForce 2, which is what I have on my computer right now, now they have the NForce 500 series or something, and the NForce 4, and it totally blows out the VIA out of the water.
Even in VIA's heyday, the chipsets were only good because we didn't have anything better to compare them to.
Yeah, because Intel makes their own chipset, so you can get an Intel motherboard, with Intel chipset and an Intel CPU on it. If you want an AMD CPU, you need to get the chipset from someone else. You need to get a chipset from NVIDIA.
And there were, before NForce, there were a bunch of chipsets, but VIA had the most features, but at the same time, it was somewhat unstable and buggy.
Yeah, the NForce is shit awesome.
Even though when NForce was announced, most people laughed at it. Why is NVIDIA trying to make a chipset? This is going to be silly.
Yeah, at first I was like, what are they doing making a chipset? Then I was like, whoa, it works, and it made it to version 2. Let me buy one.
Yep.
It was like, I don't think this is going to work, but if it does, it'll be awesome. And it was.
Now, there's also
Thankfully.
the whole bit that NVIDIA very much is behind OpenGL, which, think of this as a way to talk to the video card to make it do things. Yeah, we're trying to be really layman here because anyone who actually knows this stuff doesn't need us to explain it.
Yeah.
And ATI, instead of OpenGL, which they do support, they're very much more behind Microsoft's DirectX.
Well, they're not. It's not really a matter behind. I mean, either one of those things will work on both cards. The point is that things that use OpenGL tend to perform better on NVIDIA cards, and things that use DirectX tend to perform better on ATI cards.
Yeah, think of it this way. ATI will, when they make their card, they always think about the DirectX more than they think about the OpenGL.
I think it's more that they had to deal with Valve when they made Half-Life 2 to make Half-Life 2 run better on the ATI cards with DirectX.
Yeah. Plus, there were scandals back in the day. It used to be with Quake and Quake 2 and Quake 3, and there are all these sorts of scandals where if you ran Quake.execute, the game would run a certain way, but if you rename the executable and ran it, it would run slower because there were hard-coded things and drivers that would make certain games perform different ways in order to cheat on benchmarks.
Yep.
And both companies were guilty of this.
Yeah. Now, anyway, the point is that in Linux, you don't have DirectX. So, again, NVIDIA wins on Linux. Now, here's the thing. We like AMD chips, and we like NVIDIA cards, but if AMD is buying ATI, which they are, then is NVIDIA going to keep making its chipsets work with AMD CPUs? That's like making products that work with your competitor's product.
Now, Intel has already said that they're not going to be having anything to do with this.
Well, no. What Intel said is that, because right now ATI is making motherboard chipsets that for Intel motherboards.
Yes, and Intel had granted them a license to do this.
Yes, you have to, you can't just do that on your own. Intel has to let you.
Now, the story on Dig was a little deceptive. They said that Intel revoked their right to make them. What Intel actually did is they chose not to renew the license.
Yes, so AMD/ATI isn't going to be able to continue making chipsets for Intel motherboards.
But there's one more chipset that was in the works, the RD600 or something. I have no idea what the acronym is.
It'll get made.
Well, the thing is, people are wondering is if it is going to get made or not because it wasn't done, and they wonder if it's even worth it to finish it.
Oh, who knows?
I have no idea. I didn't actually read much about that, but I saw a reference to it.
So the thing here that is being suspected is like, okay, the gamers and the Linux guys really like NVIDIA. Most people don't care, but we also like AMD. Are we gonna see ATI become as good as AMD is because of the partnership? Are we gonna see AMD start to suck? I mean, Intel right now is doing a lot better than it used to. Like a few years ago, I'd have been like, Intel,
There was a point not too many years ago in which Intel was actually getting near bankruptcy. They were not doing well at all.
They weren't near bankruptcy, but they weren't doing as well.
Profits were way down. Their stock was dropping. They
just weren't growing as fast as they did in like the Pentium 1, 2, 3 days when they were the kings and AMD was barely there.
It didn't help that their chips cost 2 or 3 times more than equivalent AMD chips at the height of the price gap.
But now Intel is back on track with its Core 2s, and they're going to come out with like the Core 2s, Duos.
Yeah, I guess the question for me will be price. I mean, if Intel chips become as cheap as AMD chips, and they are super in line with NVIDIA, I might switch to Intel, which is a chip that since the Pentium 2, I have actually technically the Pentium 1, I have never used an Intel chip on purpose until I bought the Mac Mini.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is like, will NVIDIA even care? I mean, NVIDIA might just keep supporting, the AMD line as it is, and, gamers are the people buying NVIDIA stuff, so will they continue to buy NVIDIA AMD even though AMD ATI will basically be the same company and do evil things together?
See, I wonder. I mean, it's really hard to say what's going to happen.
And what people are saying now is that people are putting more and more stuff into the CPU. Back in the day, the math coprocessor used to be outside the CPU. Now they put it in the CPU. The cache used to be outside the CPU. Now it's inside the CPU.
In fact, my 486, I had a 486 on it, and then I bought a math coprocessor and stuck it on the motherboard.
Yep, back in the day, you'd had 2 processors. Now you have 2 processors in one processor with a dual core. If AMD and ATI are the same company, are they just going to put the ATI graphics processor in the CPU instead of putting it into the Northbridge? If that happens, then what's NVIDIA going to do? You're going to buy your chip. It's going to have a graphics processor in it already. You don't need anything else. You won't need a video card. So what's going to happen then?
Yeah, and if AMD and ATI chipsets and video cards are all chummy, maybe AMD will force ATI's drivers to not suck?
I don't know.
Will they even care?
I don't know. And then here's the other question is like, okay, if AMD is making CPUs that have ATI graphics cards in the CPU, if Intel and NVIDIA don't partner up, how are they going to compete with the old, not as fast video card separate from the CPU business?
Unless maybe NVIDIA will just go it alone, continue marketing chipsets and video cards to everybody, thus having their own kind of side market where they're not excluding anyone.
Yeah, I guess.
But is that viable?
I know. It's like, can you do that? Can you compete?
It's my opinion that they could, simply because among geeks, the names NVIDIA and Enforce carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, people all buy, the gamers especially, NVIDIA is, definitely has edged out ATI over the years.
Yeah, anyone who builds computers, who builds their own computers, even if they don't use an Enforce, they know about it and respect it.
Yeah. I don't know. Things are gonna start to get crazy now. Where, a week ago, it was just a sure thing. You know what computer to buy. You buy this motherboard that's awesome from Asus or Abit. You throw an AMD chip in it, and you buy an NVIDIA video card. Now, now that this has happened, AMD and ATI becoming partners, everything is going to get crazy, and we're not going to know what to do when we buy a computer. We're going to see how all this craziness pans out.
Yep, because I was in the process of building a new computer. I was going to buy it within a few months, and now I don't know what I'm going to do. I might hold off and wait for the dust to settle. But at the same time,
I would actually recommend that right now, the technology is still moving forward in the same direction, and none of the effects of the merger have come to be.
See, that's what I'm worried about, because if I wait, then while I'm getting the new thing, it'll be the first gen of the new thing.
I would recommend you wait right before, just as motherboards and CPUs and graphics processors keep developing in the same direction.
By the last AMD fastest chip on the best N4s.
Yeah, right before, the AMD and ATI partnership, the fruits of that partnership start to appear in products on the shelves, buy the best computer you can. That way, because stuff that works now will continue to work now. And the future stuff is going to take a whole long time to get sorted out. So right before the craziness happens, I suggest if you need a computer, you buy a good one now while everything works.
Of course, if you can hold off, you wait until slightly after the craziness, and then you buy the best of the previous generation right after it is no longer the best.
Yeah. The point is, I wouldn't recommend, I wouldn't recommend taking part in the fruits of this merger for a long time, years.
Well, I would say just generally because I don't trust ATI at all. But I trust AMD a lot, but I distrust ATI so much.
Yeah.
I mean, you should have seen, we had a good ATI video card, and we had a Linux box that we had hooked up to the TV. There was no way to make that ATI card output its S-video to our television in Linux. There was just no way.
There was no way. The NVIDIA card, we plugged it in. We plugged in the S-video cable. Immediately, the picture is on the screen without doing anything. The BIOS screen was on the TV.
It was like a Mac. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, so NVIDIA makes the good stuff, and ATI
And the
so
sad
much.
thing is, it's not like ATI, at least as far as we can tell, does it on purpose. It's not like they sit in their evil offices, we will not let people use our things on Linux. They either just don't know or don't care.
Yeah, they're pretty much, ATI is only trying to compete in one department. Make faster chips that do better benchmarks with games on Windows, and everything else is unimportant. And that's what they make. And as a result, it's not as well-rounded and solid a video card as NVIDIA tends to be.
All right, here's a funny question that no one cares about or will answer. What's Matrox going to do?
The same thing it's been doing.
Yep, make cards for very picky 2D people who don't care about gaming.
And professionals.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Things of the day, which are still in the middle of the podcast.
Hooray! We didn't lose our things.
Not yet.
All
All right, this is something we found a while ago.
Oh, Rim lost his thing.
And we didn't use it because we kept having other things, and it was so hilarious. We were kind of saving it. I'm not sure why.
And if you're wondering why it's science technology, well, it's science. It's
Somewhat.
yeah, natural selection, nature.
Theoretically, I should have used it tomorrow. But, all right, this is a video of this monkey and these two baby tigers.
Are they really baby tigers? They look like teenage tigers.
They're
to me.
very young tigers. They're very small.
Okay.
Now, the tigers are big enough to be dangerous. This monkey,
Yeah, one of these tigers would maul you.
yeah, the tiger could kill me. And the tiger is sitting there, and this monkey is hanging above him in a tree.
The monkey could probably kill you too.
And he leans down, and he smacks one of them on the ass. And it goes, and it tries to catch him, and he jumps away.
Yeah, the monkey basically like swings down out of the tree, hits the tiger in the ass, and is back up in the tree real quick, like whoop.
And then he sits up there looking at the tigers, and then he swings a branch and hits him with a branch, and then he jumps down and hits him again.
The monkey just keeps swinging down, hitting the tigers, and swinging away.
There's 5 minutes of this.
Yeah, there was one point in which the tigers tried to jump up and maul the monkey, but they just missed him.
Yep, the monkey's hanging just out of range, and then he hits him in the face. And the best part is there's a point at which the tiger thinks it's clever, and it's hiding behind this tree nearby. And the monkey jumps down on the ground and looks right at where the tiger's hiding and just sits there, waiting for the tiger to come out.
Monkeys and, other similar to human species, smarter than feline species.
Yes, this video is so worth watching. This monkey is my hero.
You know what? The monkey is braver than almost any human alive. I mean, even a lion, tiger, tamer guy, either they're they have tigers that are tamed and won't try to maul you.
Or they get mauled.
So,
but think of this, humans, right? A human will risk his life, for love or liberty or land or money or women or something. This monkey is risking his life purely for his own amusement.
And such a tiny bit of amusement too.
I don't know, the monkey looked really happy about all this.
Yeah, but it's just hitting a tiger in the face.
Yeah, and then the tiger gets mad and tries to get you, and you, missed me. Jump back down, hit him in the ass again.
I mean, I could play that game with Rim without risking my life.
That's just because I don't have a big enough mouth.
That's right.
All right, you have some sort of thing of the day.
Yeah, this is technology. It's sort of a military technology for you military fanboys out
Katsu
there.
will like this one.
Yeah. So they have this machine gun. Not like a submachine gun. Not like an M16, which is an assault rifle, I guess. But a machine gun.
Like a para.
A 50 caliber mounted on a tripod on the ground machine gun. The kind you feed a chain of bullets into. And they have a katana. Like Leonardo from the Ninja Turtles.
A samurai sword.
A samurai sword, yes, exactly.
They mount this thing.
They have the sword like basically mounted, pointing straight up at the sky. So the edge, the sharp edge of the sword is pointed straight at the machine gun. Then they fire an entire chain of bullets out of this machine gun at the sword. So the bullets are heading directly at the pointy bit.
Now, it's interesting enough watching it in full speed, but then they do it in ultra slow motion.
It's funny because you can hear the guy say, ultra slow motion camera.
Yes.
Yeah, and basically they start counting off each bullet. They're like, bullet number 1. And you see bullet number 1 come up to the sword, hit the sword, and get deflected. But it takes a big chunk out of the sword. Then they're like, bullet number 2. And bullet number 2 comes at the sword. And it gets cut in half.
Several of the bullets get cut directly in half.
I think how many bullets did it happen before the sword? I mean, they show you right at the beginning of the video that the sword does basically get grinded in half. The sword doesn't make it.
It takes quite a few bullets, and it only breaks because eventually many of the bullets hit in the exact same spot over and over.
Yeah, if all the bullets, if they basically, the machine gun is set so precisely in place that, you know, the bullets all hit pretty much near the same area on the sword. If they were spread up more vertically and hit different parts of the sword, it might have lasted a lot longer. But it didn't, and the sword died. But it was still a pretty impressive fight for the sword.
But anyway, it being Science and Technology Day, we are going to talk somewhat briefly, we'll see how long this takes, about technology lies. Now, you might wonder what we mean by that, because there are a lot of lies in the science and technology world.
Oh my God, are there so many lies?
We're going to narrow it down to this one scenario and all of the related scenarios to it.
It's mostly lies in consumer electronics, if you think about it.
Now, you ever been to a Best Buy or a Circuit City, and say you walk in and you want to buy, I don't know, a home stereo system or a home theater or a television or a new computer. And, you know, you buy it and it's got a good price. And then the salesman will always say something like, you gotta have clean power coming into that thing. You need a good surge protector. I recommend this. And then he'll hand you some like $70 power strip. Or to get the best video quality on your new HD TV, you need these monster optical digital cables.
Yep.
As opposed to these $5 completely identical digital optical cables. Digital, meaning there can't be any difference at all, no matter what, because it's digital.
Yeah.
That's really what we want to talk about today.
All right, so let's start with the audiophile lies.
All right. Very briefly, audiophiles. Now, the word technically means something different, but what
the word audiophile technically means, in dictionary-wise, someone who really likes audio.
Now, if you really like audio, do not call yourself an audiophile. That word has become something new.
Yeah, just call yourself like a music lover or something.
Audiophiles are people who will buy $4,000 power cables and claim they can hear the difference in the stereo they plug them into.
They will buy vacuum tube amplifiers, which are the same power as like a cheap-ass amplifier from the store, because they claim that, you know, it sounds better.
Well, actually, Scott, vacuum tube amplifiers do sound different. Because the way...
They sound different, but do they sound better?
Well, they could sound better, but they don't reproduce the sound accurately.
But could you make an amplifier that sounds just as good as a vacuum tube amplifier?
Yes, you could make a digital amplifier that sounds identical to an analog amplifier.
And would it be cheaper?
Significantly so.
So why would you ever buy a vacuum tube amplifier?
Because you're an idiot.
Or there's another reason. If the year was like 1960 or 50 something.
1957.
Or 58. Then you would also buy a vacuum tube amplifier.
Now, let's look at TVs, you know, component cables that use to connect like your old non-HD DVD player to your nice non-HD TV. there is the $5 component cable from like some random
Well,
company.
actually, is the thing is that component cables, even the cheapest ones from Radio Shack, are still kind of expensive. They're like 10, 15
Well,
bucks.
yeah, but you know what? The cheapest one is no different than the $50 monster one.
Exactly. If you go to the store and you see two cables, you go to Radio Shack and they have plain, normal video cable for connecting your DVD player to your television. And then you go to Circuit City and they have the monster cable, which is the exact same cable, but it's all fancy and has all kinds of shielding and plastic and colors, and it's 10 times as much money. Guess what? Both of those cables are exactly identical in function.
Yes, and even worse are when people try to pass off digital cables as different. A digital cable is a digital cable. The signal either gets all the way there or it never gets there. There is no middle ground.
Yeah, on an analog cable, just so we can get this straight, you're sending an electrical wave over the wire.
So if
And
the cable's poorly shielded or something, you could get interference.
Yes, it is possible for there to be interference on that wire. You'll know if like your speakers are going like then there's probably interference going on.
However, the lie here is that the so-called better cables aren't actually any better. But anyway.
Yes, but digital cables, all they're doing is going 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1. And you know what? Either the zeros and ones make it to the other end or they don't. You can't interfere with the zeros and ones.
Because if you interfere with them, that means that there's such a powerful interference that no cable would have worked.
And that it'll just not, you won't hear, like, your music won't get messed up. You just won't hear music because the zeros and ones won't make it. I mean, if I sent you an MP3 that's missing a few ones and zeros, you can't play it in your MP3 player. It won't work. That's what happens if zeros and ones go missing, which means someone probably cut your cable with a scissor or a knife or something. So,
now, despite this, whenever you go to a place like Circuit City or Best Buy, the salesmen are told, they're trained, they must try to sell you the monster cables. Now, when we say monster, I mean the brand Monster.
Yep.
They're a brand, and they charge 5 or 6 times what they should for something that is not any better.
There are other brands that try to pull a similar scam, but they're all the same, and Monster is the worst offender.
Yes, power supplies, well, not really power supplies,
Power
but power
strips.
strips and UPSs.
Yes, if you go to Best Buy and they have this $200 power strip and they claim it does all these filtering things, and they even have a spot where like you can filter your telephone cable and you can filter your network cable and you can filter your audio cables, your coaxial cable television cable. And guess what? None of those things do shit.
Now
they don't do anything.
Now, there are some situations where you would need some sort of power conditioning because power that comes into your house is not perfect. It is not the exact number of hertz that they say it is. It is not the exact frequencies they say it is because our electrical system is really old and it really doesn't matter. No one cares. And minor fluctuation like this could affect the long-term usefulness or viability of electronic equipment, and in
Yes.
extreme cases could somehow affect the audio in certain devices. However, if that is the case, an actual power conditioner would cost a quarter of what these crap fake power strips sell for. And for $30, you could buy a UPS that would rectify the power 100%.
Yep. Let me give you the example. If you plug your computer's power supply directly into the wall, you know, the fact that the power isn't perfect will probably, over time, over a long period of time, eventually cause your power supply in your computer to stop functioning.
Because when there are sudden voltage drops, the power supply has to make up for it. And when there's little surges, the power supply has to deal with it.
Yes. But if you had a UPS, which is basically a battery, in between your computer and the wall, that battery will handle it whenever the wall isn't perfect. And as far as your power supply in your computer is concerned, everything is perfect because the battery is, you know, a nice little buffer and everything's taken care of.
Yes, I mean, think of it this way. You can buy one of these magic power strips for like $50, $60, $70, up to $200 or $300 that doesn't do much. It's just a fancy power surge protector.
I mean, it is a surge protector. It surge protects, you know, with the rest of them.
Or for $30, you can buy a UPS for one computer or one device.
Yep.
That'll be just as good, in fact, better, because it'll also protect you if the power goes out.
Yeah, I mean, my computer with this $30 UPS will stay on for like a few minutes if the power goes out, which gives me enough time to press shut down, and then it'll turn off.
Now, you think we're just talking about audio and video. Say you go to Best Buy, they're the worst for this, and you buy a USB printer. Now, the USB printer is always very, very cheap, and they follow the razor blade model and get you with the ink cartridge later. But aside from that, USB printers don't come with USB cables anymore. And if you look, the only USB cables that Best Buy sells are either Monster brand or the equivalent.
Does Monster really make USB cables?
Yes.
Yeah, USB cables can be basically USB is 4 wires plus minus electricity and ground.
That's it.
That's
And
it. It's
now-
4 wires all bundled up with a plug on each end.
So if you need USB cables, look around online. You can buy pretty much any lengths you want for $4 or $5 a cable.
Yes, buy in bulk, because if you're a person with computers in your house, you need USB cables. We actually have a shortage of USB cables.
You know what? Not even in bulk. Even if you buy them online or just from local computer shops, they're cheap as hell because you can just make them if you really want.
I know, but we could just go online right now and buy. You can buy different colors too. You get like 4 or 5 USB cables, the A to B kind or the B to B kind, and you'll be set forever, and it'll run you less than the cost of 1 or 2 cables at Best Buy or Circuit City.
Now, Best Buy will they'll say, oh, you need a USB cable for this. And then they'll hand you the Monster cable, and they'll actually try to talk you out of not buying it. They might even say things like it works better or it's faster. They'll just lie to you outright.
Yeah, the reason for this is that they make an incredible amount of money on those cables because they pay Monster maybe like $10-15 for those things.
The markup is insane.
And then they sell them for 50 or something. It's crazy. They make a lot more money by selling you a crazy, stupid power strip and a bunch of cables than they make by selling you a television.
You think it ends there? Ethernet cables are the same way.
Oh, God, Ethernet cables are the worst.
All right, now think about the last time you were in a computer store and you saw, like the 10-foot and the 5-foot and the 20-foot Ethernet cables, network cables, and how much they cost. I will tell you right now that I can right now in my house make for you an Ethernet cable, and it would cost me about 7 cents per foot.
7 cents, people.
7 cents.
Yet they're selling 5-foot cables at Staples for like $15.
Now, why? Are those cables better? The answer is no. In fact, in many cases, they're not as good because they're usually Cat 5e. And actually, most people who actually wire buildings use Cat 6e because it costs the same, and it theoretically, in most situations, can do gigabit Ethernet.
Theoretically.
Yeah. We've done it.
Yeah. The point here is that if you go to Home Depot, you can buy a box of Ethernet cable for like $40, and it's like a bajillion feet.
Or you can just buy it by the foot, and even then, it's like 10 or 11 cents a foot.
Yeah, I know. I remember at work, we needed a whole bunch of cables, and we called up some place, and, we ordered like, I think it was like 100 8-foot Ethernet cables, and, sure, it was a little bit more expensive than if we had gone to Home Depot to buy a box of cable or made it ourselves, but it was way cheaper than buying them from Staples or Best Buy.
Yeah.
Way cheaper, like hundreds and hundreds of dollars cheaper.
Now, the general moral of this, because if you don't know about the technology of whatever it is you're purchasing, it might not be easy to spot when something is a ripoff and when something isn't. Like, when you're doing audio stuff, for example, yeah, the magic special Monster cable isn't any better than the shit cable. But if you're doing something professional, you want to look at the impedance and you want to match everything, and you got to get certain kinds of cables sometimes. But it depends on what you're doing, and if you don't know about the technology, there's no way you're going to find out.
So basically, unless you're a professional working in like a record studio, recording artists and music and all that sort of shit, or at a real radio station, buy the cheapest you can get that does the job.
More importantly, if you're ever in a big box store or a chain, basically, my advice to you is one, never listen to anything a salesperson tells you that isn't a price. Because they will outright lie in many situations to trick you into buying the things that make them the most money.
Yep. I mean, there's a famous story, it's semi-famous, of this guy who went to Best Buy, and he knew this. He knew all these things that we know. And he wanted to buy an HD TV. And, he knew which TV he wanted, and he bargained with the Best Buy guy. And he said, all right, you lower the price on this TV, and I'll buy this crazy $200 power strip and all these Monster cables. So the Best Buy guy was like, yes, haha, all right. I lowered the price on the guy's TV, and he bought all these cables. That's great for me as an employee of the store. I get a lot of, brownie points for that.
Yep, or sometimes commissions or kickbacks. Depends on the store.
Yep, so the guy buys the TV and all these cables, and he goes home. The next day, he comes back and returns all the cables in the power strip unopened, and he basically gets a discounted TV. Of course, he had to fight for it, but I think he won in the end. The point is that, yeah.
Yeah, they will outright lie to you, and usually they don't even know they're lying because they don't know anything about the stuff.
Oh, God. Those people who work in Best Buy, Circuit City, even Radio Shack nowadays, they don't know shit.
The thing is, they are given, like say they sell monster cables at Best Buy. They are given little classes or talks on monster cables and how great they are, and these are run by Monster or the company that makes money.
Yes, these people are trained salesmen. They don't really know anything about televisions or electronics, or maybe there's like the rare high school or college kid who's working there part-time who actually knows something and, just wants to get a discount
But even then,
in the video games and the anime.
He'll get in trouble if he actually tells you what's up.
He will indeed. If he is caught telling you the real deal, he will get in trouble. And also, he has an incentive to lie to you and go with the flow because then he makes more commissions and money and all that good stuff. So usually those guys tend to work in the video game section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the rules are, 1, never trust anything a salesperson tells you, especially when it comes to technology. And 2, never buy cables from Circuit City or Best Buy.
Or other similar stores you might have.
Buy them from a local computer store. They'll be far cheaper. Or buy them online.
Shack. Radio Shack, if you get the normal cables, they're slightly overpriced, but it's better than anywhere else you're going to go. So
if you live anywhere near a geek or you live near the Geek House here, give us a call. I'll make you any freaking Ethernet cable you want.
Yeah. All right, now there's one more lie that we want to talk about, and that is the lie of specifications.
Now, you might see, someone sells a new HD TV, and they say, oh, it has a 8,000 to 1 contrast ratio.
Or you'll go and you'll buy a new LCD monitor, and they'll say, contrast ratio this, color saturation something else. Or you'll buy a sound card, and they'll say signal to noise ratio something.
The biggest problem was monitors in the when at the peak of the CRT days, before LCDs were viable in any stretch.
Think 1996, 1997.
Yeah, that era, when they would say the dot pitch.
Oh, God.
And they would give you the dot pitch of the monitor. Now, some statistics about technology are accurate representations. They're objective measures.
For example, I would say this monitor supports a maximum resolution of 1280 by 1024.
That is objective. It cannot show
at X number of hertz.
It cannot show more than that many pixels at that many hertz.
At that speed.
Or this monitor requires this much power to operate.
Or this monitor has a DVI cable hole and a VGA hole.
Now, beyond that, contrast ratio, we'll use that first because that's the easiest one to just throw away. Now,
it is.
Theoretically, it is the ratio of the difference between the brightest color a monitor can show and the blackest color a monitor can show.
So what you want in a contrast ratio of any display technology is a very high number and a very low number, because that means that when there is black on the screen, it will be pitch black. And when there is white on the screen, it will be white, white, white.
Now, a lot of companies, especially lower end or shadier ones, will advertise all sorts of different contrast ratios. The thing is, you have to bear in mind that with most of these non-purely objective statistics, there is absolutely no standard or regulatory control over how they advertise this. And every company can measure it in any cockamamie way they want.
Yeah, so one company says, oh, this is how we measure contrast ratio. We use this method. And then we round off to the nearest thousandth, and then this. And, they give you a number like, oh, this thing has an 8,000 to 1 contrast ratio. And another company measures some other monitor, and they say this one has a 6,000 to 1. But the 6,000 to 1 actually looks better and has a darker black and a brighter white than the 8,000
Yep.
one.
And sometimes they'll straight up lie. They really will, especially some shady companies. They'll just make up numbers.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, yeah, this thing has a 10 hajillion to 1 contrast ratio. It's the best thing in the universe.
He's 2 more than X.
Yeah, it's better. Also, when TVs are on the display floor, they often set the color settings to look really good on a display floor. But those aren't the settings you use at home. So don't trust the way the screen looks in the store as to how it's going to look in your house.
Yep. I remember I read an article of exactly what they do to TVs in Best Buy because someone leaked the document.
Yeah. What you want to do is you want to go into the Best Buy, you want to pick up the remote and reset the TV to the settings that you're going to use at home in a normal, watching a real movie condition.
Also, if you can, you want to put in any DVD or input other than what they're showing, because they show things that very specifically are designed to make the TVs look a lot sharper than they are.
Yeah, they show cartoons with really bright colors. They show nature things. They show concerts with bright lights and fog. They show super epic Hollywood movies. Go grab yourself like a normal DVD from the shelf, of like an 80s movie or something, or an anime, and put that in there. And then you'll be able to tell what's going on.
Now, dot pitch was another big one. It's not so much of an issue now because with LCD monitors, it's really an irrelevant statistic.
Yep.
But it's especially on CRTs and televisions, it is basically the distance between the pixels or between the colors. Now, I say or because that's tricky. I mean, on CRTs, you usually have 3 different phosphors for every pixel. So did they measure from the center of those 3 to the center of the other 3? What if they're in a line? Do they measure it diagonally, up and down, horizontally, vertically, backwards? There are so many ways to do it that the statistic becomes meaningless.
There are lots of other different measurements for different products, not just display technology.
Like even processors, the megahertz.
Yeah, well, megahertz is a pretty solid measurement in and of itself.
Yes, but people...
the megahertz is not directly proportional to the speed of the computer.
See,
if you want, I can go find a 1 gigahertz processor that's faster than a 1.5 gigahertz processor.
See, because first we talked about statistics and data that are either useless or outright lies. There's also the case where there is data that is perfectly verifiable and legitimate, but people will grossly overstate or understate the significance. Like, say there's a mega blobs, and a Fleam has 8 mega blobs, but this other company's Fleam has 9 mega blobs. Now, what's the difference of 1 mega blob? I mean, is 1 mega blob something that you'll notice? Is it something inconsequential? Is
it worth the difference in price between the 2 products?
Is it even measurable? It could just be a statistical coincidence. I mean, a really important thing here is the idea of statistical significance. I'm not going to go over it because none of you care, but you can analyze data, and based on the data and the data set and various calculus, you can figure out how reliable or accurate or useful the data you have is. So you'll be able to say, like, within a precision of 5% in either direction, we are 95% sure that this number is within 5% of this number, or something like that. Below that, a number is not statistically significant, meaning you can't reasonably draw a conclusion based on the number because the difference in the number is so negligible that it's not differentiable from static.
Yeah, it's like, this, monitor has a 5 and the other monitor has a 4.9. Well, is the 5 better than the 4.9? We don't know because when we might have measured the 4.9 wrong, it might actually be a 5.3. It could just be, noise rate, randomness in the measuring process.
I mean, think in first-person shooters. I mean, the difference between 10 frames per second and 20 frames per second is insane. The difference between 100 frames a second and 500 is undetectable by human eyes.
Exactly. Even though if someone came up and told you this thing is 500 frames a second and that one's only 100, you'd be like, holy crap, it's 5 times better. No, it's 0 times better.
Now, with technology, the advice isn't so well, with technology like that, it's not as easy as don't listen to the salespeople, don't buy any cables in the store, because there's really no one. You just have to ask a geek. I hate to say that, but...
Well, what you can also do is before you buy any consumer electronic product, you want to research not any specific product. You want to research that variety of product itself. So if you're in the market for an HD TV, research HD TVs. Learn everything you can about HD TV technology. And don't get your information from any company that sells HD TVs, like Best Buy or Circuit City. Don't get your information from any company that makes HD TVs, like, I don't know, Samsung or Sony or anyone. Get your information from independent geek sources that talk about the technology itself, like Engadget or Us or someone, anywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
Wikipedia even.
Keep in mind that we do this too. When I built my first computer before I went to RIT, I spent over 2 months researching every single component and learning everything I could about them. I learned about all the different kinds of RAM and chipsets. And
I had a 1-year subscription to Computer Shopper just to learn all that stuff.
I mean, I would read about how sound cards worked in detail. So then when I went to the store and I looked at 2 sound cards, I could say to myself, wow, this one is clearly superior. I will purchase it. Or this one is only slightly superior but costs 10 times as much. This is bullshit.
Yes, if you are less knowledgeable than the Best Buy and Circuit City employees, they are going to fool you and you're going to end up getting ripped off and buying some monster cables. You have to know more than they do. I mean, it's sad. I really wish that I didn't have to know more than them, because I wish that the Best Buy and Circuit City employees were experts who knew everything about technology and were honest and would share the truth and really help you find the best product at the best price.
The problem is that's not economically viable. You make much more money by selling schlock to idiots.
And having idiots sell schlock to idiots.
Yes.
If there was a store where there were like genius geeks running the store, that would be the best store in the world. I wouldn't have to research shit. It would be so great. I would go into the store and I would say, genius geeks who spend your life in this store, you know what to buy.
In fact, I remember the exact moment when I became disillusioned. I went to a computer store that no longer exists. And this was before I'd even built a computer. I mean, this is way back in the day. Windows NT had just come out. And I go to this big computer store. It was like a computer store and nothing more. They only sold computers and computer equipment. It was huge. And I found a salesman. I talked to him. And I said, I want a dual CPU machine with Windows NT, because I'd read about Windows NT and I wanted to try it. And I had all these demands and things I wanted. And the guy stared at me like I was an idiot. And I don't think he even knew what I meant by dual CPU. And then he said, you don't want Windows NT. And I said, why not? And he said, no one uses Windows NT. It's too hard to use. It's expensive. I said, but I want Windows NT. I know all about it, and I want to run it. And he said, you don't want Windows NT. And that was really pretty much the end of that day of shopping.
Yes, it was.
I mean, I wish I was exaggerating or making that up, but that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more expensive product is clearly superior. All right.
Yeah, I think we're done, but people did complain that the show cuts off abruptly, so now I'm going to ramble for a little bit.
Well, I think I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the audiophile stuff.
All right, we've gone on a little bit long, though, so.
All right, just because at the beginning we kind of brushed it off, but there is a lot of stuff out there in audiophile technology which is just completely false. Like, we're not even talking about, they lie about the numbers or they overcharge. We're talking about this is a speaker that, they'll say this wooden volume knob will make your stereo sound better.
We're not kidding. That was a very specific product. In fact, it had imitators.
Yeah. Or they'll say, these crystals, if you put these crystals or you put this sticker on the side of your speakers, it'll make it sound more natural.
I read, there was someone's blog, and he was an audiophile, and he'd talk about with his audiophile friends. It was linked to, in fact, from the JREF a while ago. And this guy was testing sound with someone in a room that had an oak table in the room and a turntable. And, they were comparing the various between this diamond tip needle and this other slightly different diamond tip needle and this power cable versus this power cable and all sorts of masturbatory bullshit. And the worst part is that these people will lie to each other and themselves. They will convince themselves that they hear the difference, thus justifying their purchase, and thus they can say to other people, oh, of course you couldn't hear it. I have the golden ear. My ears are so attuned to the wonderful nature of music that I can hear the slightest disturbance in the sound and blah, 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 blah.
Yes, they're people selling products. If anyone tries to sell you anything and they say that it will make your music sound better, unless it's like $1, they're probably lying to you.
Yes, I mean...
They're probably just selling something that does nothing. A wooden volume knob does nothing except make your volume knob look like wood.
I mean, there are high-end audio things. I mean, I could buy a $400 pair of monitor headphones that is absolutely perfect in every way. These people will buy $4,000 ones.
That are perfect in every way, but no different.
In fact, many times this audiophile stuff is actually worse because the people buying it can't actually tell, and you make so much more money by making it cheaply and quickly.
Yeah, like some guy will say, oh, I made this cable out of gold. It makes everything sound so much better, and it has a platinum core, and it's only $7,000 for this incredibly amazing cable that will allow no interference and transmit perfect analog audio from your analog amplifier to your, speakers. And some crazy audiophile will go, oh my God, I bought it and I can totally hear the difference. This is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I'm so much better than everyone else who can't hear it.
When in fact, it might not even be a gold cable. It's probably just like a cable spray painted with gold and, with some lead in it to make it heavy. And
now to go back,
it doesn't make the sound any better than the cheap-ass cables from Radio Shack.
That's actually one trick that a lot of low-end but marketed to the high-end audience will use is they will put weights inside of their equipment to make it feel heavier and feel more massive and meaningful.
Yes, if you want to buy a stereo, right, and you're not sure if it's going to sound good or not, or if you're spending too much to make it sound good, all you have to do is pay attention to 1, the speakers, and 2, the amplifier.
The best thing to do is just run some sort of blind test where you get someone else to play the 2 stereos while you stand with your back turned and see if you can hear the difference. And you know what? If you can't easily tell the difference, there's effectively no difference.
And you just buy whichever one's cheaper.
Now, to go back to that blog, they had this big oak table in the room and they're listening to all this stuff. And then they decided to take a lunch break and they come back and one of them was drinking tea and he'd spilled some tea on the oak table. Now, they start listening to everything again to confirm their findings, and suddenly the sound was all wrong and everything was terrible and they couldn't figure out why everything sounded bad. And then he realized he had spilled tea on the oak table. I am not kidding. That is what they decided was ruining the sound quality. So they had the oak table removed from the room and suddenly everything went back to normal.
Yeah, so that's called crazy people.
Now, the best part is, all of these people, if you subject them to a double-blind test, wherein they don't know what stereo system they're listening to. And
So let me explain this in more detail. You blindfold someone. You put them in a room. You then turn a stereo on playing song. You then change to the other stereo playing the same song. You then ask them which one sounded better.
And you do this a bunch of times, and every study has shown that not only can they not tell the difference, but oftentimes, if anything, they'll prefer the much cheaper system.
Yeah, I mean, there have been tests where people have compared, like, you know, $10,000 Bose home theaters to, like, the $100 cheap Asian brand home theater in a box, and the home theater in a box wins, even when you, like, plug an iPod into it as opposed to, like, a DVD player or something.
Now, a nice trick here. You might have heard the phrase, no highs, no lows, must be Bose.
Oh, God.
Now, while that's a little bit true and that Bose speakers tend to be very overpriced, especially for what you get.
I mean, they do sound good. They're not bad speakers. You know, if you're comparing them solely as speakers and not as the price and everything else.
But basically, anyone who's trying to give you advice about audio, and they say that phrase in a non-ironic, non-jocular way, do not take their advice, because that is like the creed. That's the mating signal of an audiophile.
Exactly.
Good God.
Bose has somehow marketed itself and actually convinced people that their product is somehow sounds better than other people's stuff. Guess what? It's just speakers. I mean, they charge for Bose speakers like 10 times as much as they charge for other speakers, and they sound good, but they're not that much better. There's nothing special about Bose that's any better than Sony or Samsung or Pioneer or anyone else. They're just speakers. They're just good speakers, but they're not super amazing, worth a fortune.
And on that note, Scott, I'm cutting you off because now we have gone long.
Okay.
And I think the episode was long enough. Once again, give us feedback as to how you want the show to change, if you want to change it at all. We're not going to talk about our changes. We're just going to start making them. So let us know if anything works particularly well or you don't like it or whatever.
All right.
And that was Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcast, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1537.
Geeknights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geeknights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night.